And let's give another round of applause to Tommie Burton. Thank you for being with us today. So we are continuing to explore the archetypes, and we're kind of wrapping it up as we come to the end of the year for this year's theme, which has been Igniting the Archetype. And for December, we are exploring the sage. We are igniting the sage. And the sage comes in popular culture in many different forms, such as Yoda in Star Wars, or Deanna Troi in Star Trek, or the late Ira Hoover from Seattle Unity. And exactly, he's the sage if I ever met a sage. And of course, the sage that dwells within each one of us. The sage is always seeking the truth. Always on a journey of this. They're always learning. And last week I sort of looked at what makes a sage, and bottom line, it's wisdom. Wisdom is what is one of the key attributes of a sage. And they show up in our lives as a mentor, as a teacher, as an advisor. And the way that we gain wisdom, according to studies, is by experiences. But it's not just experiences, because otherwise all of us who've lived a long time would be wise, but that's not necessarily the case. But rather it is learning from our experiences. And the more that we are present to and authentic with both the positive and negative experiences in our lives, the better we are at attaining wisdom. Now, in order to be present to the experiences that we're having in our lives, it calls for a certain level of self-awareness. And sometimes it may mean looking at a situation from a different perspective. Sometimes that may mean that we may have to see what our part is in the situation, and maybe we were wrong. God forbid that should ever happen. But it's about looking honestly at different things. So there's a new term, or at least it is to me, that instead of having crises and experiences that cause post-traumatic syndrome, rather a crisis can cause post-growth syndrome. In other words, we have these experiences, but we grow from them instead of being crippled by them. And that is wisdom. So today, I want to look at sage women. And I have chosen 3 to look at today. The first is Mary, the second is Hildegard of Bingen, and the last is Toccata Iron Eyes. Now, we may not think of a sage when we think of Mary, right? That's probably not the first archetype that comes up for you when you think of her. Instead, we may think of mother, nurturer, wife. But Nancy Rockwell challenges us to see Mary in a different light. She says, she gives birth in a barn, and she welcomes weathered shepherds in the middle of the night. She is determined, not domestic. She is free, not foolish, holy, not helpless, strong, not submissive. She beckons women everywhere to speak out for God's justice, which is waiting to be born in this world. So it's a new Mary, Mary the sage. So when we think of the Christ being born, we think of justice being born. We think of fairness, of acceptance, of love and kindness. This is what is seeking to be born in our world when we talk about the Christ being born. So Mary's story. We all know Mary's story, but she was visited by the angel Gabriel, who says, "You will conceive a child." And what's interesting about Mary is that she automatically says yes, right? Now, when you think about the hero's journey, in myth and in story, usually what does the hero do? The hero says no and runs away. And then there's all these things that have to happen in order for the hero to end up on his journey. Mary doesn't do any of this. She accepts this calling. She accepts her purpose and says yes to it. And her first action is to go and visit her cousin Elizabeth, who is elderly and pregnant with John the Baptist. In Luke, we read, "When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, The baby leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. In a loud voice she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear." So, Mary demonstrates wisdom. Mary is the sage by doing what needs to be done. Last week we talked about some of the key characteristics of wisdom or gaining wisdom. And one of the things that wise people do is that they surround themselves with a supportive environment. They have friends, they have family, they have a therapist, they have a support group around them, right? And what does Mary do? She goes to the one person she knows who will understand what is going on in her life. She goes to her cousin Elizabeth. She goes to that support group who stands with her in this purpose and in this mission. So, one of the key characteristics of a sage is to have a support group. Now, Mary travels to Bethlehem, and she's 9 months pregnant. Now, what 9-month pregnant woman would want to travel anywhere? Your urge is to nest, not to travel. However, she isn't afraid, and she willingly says yes to her calling, and it is her wisdom in later years that calls Jesus into performing, if you will, his first miracle. So they're at the wedding, and, they're running out of wine, and she's like, "Come on, Jesus, And he's like, "Woman, my time has not come." And she said, "My son will take care of this," right? So, we see the Jewish mother kind of like, "Oh, this is my son. He's wonderful. He can do all kinds of things." And of course he does. But I think one of the characteristics that we're seeing here in Mary is that she's calling out the Christ in the Christ, right? She's calling out the Christ in Jesus. And when we have that support group, when we are calling out the Spirit of God and the divine in one another, we see the potential that maybe we don't see in ourselves. Because Jesus didn't feel ready at that moment, and yet she calls him out. So what does it mean that the Christ is seeking to be born in us? I think that when we see that potential in each other, then we are Mary midwifing Christ consciousness into the world. And it's about that divine nature coming forth that she emulated. So the second woman, so when you are nurturing somebody, when you are saying, "Hey, I know you can do it. Not only do I know you can do it, but I can see you doing it, and you're going to be a success," you're being Mary in that moment. Own it. The second woman that I want to talk about is Hildegard von Bingen, and she was born in 1098. She was a mystic, a sage, a teacher, a composer, an architect, a doctor, a healer, a visionary, an activist, a saint, a public speaker. You name it, this woman did it. She was quite amazing. She started to have visions at the age of 3, so her mom and dad put her in a convent when she was around 8. And she kept her visions pretty secret. Only a select few really knew that she would see all things in the light of God through the 5 senses. Now, as time went on, and she was in this convent for a while, she decided that really what she wanted to do was to create her own place, her own convent, have her own order. So she went to the abbot, and she asked him, and he said no. So then she went over his head to the archbishop, and she asked him. And he actually said yes, but anyway, politically something happened. She couldn't get out. And then she got really sick, and she said, "It's God who is not punishing me, but this is what's happening to me because I'm not fulfilling my purpose." So eventually she gets her own convent, her own order, and she flourishes. She is creative. She is said to be the originator of the opera. We still perform and play her music today. She was a healer. She was a doctor. She just blossomed once she had her own place. She also was a public speaker. She spoke not only in monasteries, but she gave public lectures. And what's interesting is that the acceptance of public preaching by a woman, even someone as well connected as she was, and an acknowledged prophet, did not fit the stereotype of women at that time. And we're talking 1,000 years ago. She was a holistic healer and a doctor, and her reputation as a medicinal writer and healer was used by early feminists to argue for women's rights to attend medical school. So we could see her influences. She influenced Matthew Fox and the creation theology. She influenced Rudolf Steiner and the Waldorf work. So it kind of just these echoes of her life go on and affect us in ways that we may not even know. True sage. But I think that her life is encapsulated in something that she said, and I want to share that with you. We cannot live in a world not our own, in a world that is interpreted for us by others. An interpreted world is not home. Part of the terror, I like that she uses the word terror, part of the terror is to take back our own listening, to use our own voice, and to see our own light. So we can hear it when she gets her own place, that all of a sudden she's living in a world that is no longer being interpreted by her elders. It's a world that is interpreted the way she sees fit that it should be interpreted, and this incredible creativity comes through her. The visions come through her, but it's only when she's willing to stand in that, it's only when she's willing to truly own that it starts to come through more fully and completely. And I love what she says about how important it is to do one's own listening. Right? We need to be in integrity and authentic and be listening so that we have our own voice and we're not just echoing or parroting what someone else is saying. And she says, we need to see our own light. So we have Mary who's calling the light out of other people, right? And seeing it. And here we have Hildegard who says, you need to see your own light and you need to bring your own light out into the world. So we claim our own light, we claim our own voice, and we combine these two, right? Mary, the birth of the Christ, and Hildegard. I want to share with you a quote that someone had put on Facebook. There's so much great stuff on Facebook. And it's by Matthew Kelly. It goes back to the idea of wisdom and your community, right? And again, when Hildegard had her community, it was then that she fully stepped out into her work. The people we surround ourselves with either raise or lower our standards. They either help us become the best version of ourselves or encourage us to become lesser versions of ourselves. We become like our friends. So we all need people in our lives who raise our standards, who remind us of our essential purpose, and challenge us to become the best version of ourselves. So who are your friends? Who are your closest friends? Do they lift you up or do they bring you down? It's a question, I think, that we need to ask ourselves over and over again. For it's one thing to help other people, but it's another to go, okay, so who am I reflecting? And how can I call out the Christ? So we've talked about Mary and Hildegard, but wait, there's one more. One does not have to be an elder to have wisdom. And so the third person that I want to call out is Dakota Iron Eyes. And if you could lower the screen. Now, she is 13 years old, and she is at the core of the movement at Standing Rock, and she is wise beyond her years. Now, there are many things that are happening at Standing Rock on many levels. Again, one of the qualities of wisdom is to be able to see patterns, is to be able to step back and to see what is going on. So on one level, it's about pipeline and it's about oil, but on another level, it's an opportunity for wisdom and for sages of all ages, shapes, and sizes to come forward. So in North Dakota, there are tribes that have come together that have not gotten along for hundreds of years. They have warred with each other, and they have come together to support and stand with each other. Now, they still have their differences, but they have come together for a common purpose. So rather than me quote her, I thought it would be best for us to hear her words. Now, you get this is a little bit of an infomercial, but there's another one that follows this that is kind of like this is the setup, and the next one is the punch, sort of. So let's just hear her words. 13 years old.
We're making history right now. This is a historical moment that people are going to remember for the rest of their lives. The pipeline was initially supposed to be built in Bismarck, North Dakota. And those people said, no, we don't want this pipeline because it's going to ruin our water. So then they moved it down here to the reservation. Since we're downstream, it'll hit us right away. This is impacting me. This is impacting my life. We're only here today to protect this land because our ancestors, they fought for this land. Tribes from all across the United States have been coming to this camp. We used to be enemies, some of the tribes. To see everyone coming together despite past conflicts, it's so beautiful. We've all been praying together and eating together, and it's like we are all one big family and we're in this together. I think that's what motivates me the most, is to see how many people care. Like, I can't even stress that enough. It's so awesome. I want everyone to know that this isn't just for us. This is a wake-up call to everyone. Everything needs water to live. I want everyone to not be embarrassed to come out here and just to help. Anything you can do is so helpful, and it means so much. Thank you.
So that was the first video, and they need to set up the second one. So many of you probably know that last Sunday it was they won, or at least temporarily, because it's not over yet, but that they're not going to put the pipeline under their river. And so the next video is the very moment when she finds this out. She's just heard it, and it's like, 2 minutes after she just got the news. So I'd like for you to hear that.
Can you tell me your name and who you are?
My name is Tokata Ionized. I'm 13 years old and I'm from the Standing Rock Reservation.
And you helped start this movement, didn't you? Tell me about that.
This entire movement was brought up by the youth, and it just started so small, and then this entire camp was built, and it was just very powerful to see everybody coming together and living together and praying together and having ceremonies together, and it was just so powerful.
And what just happened?
And now the easement for DAPL was denied.
When?
Like just now.
And how do you feel about that as a 13-year-old who just launched a campaign with your friends and your family?
I feel like I got my future back.
You got your future back, honey?
Oh my God.
Well, you're fighting for your future and a lot of other people's future too. Thank you.
I got my future back. It's very powerful. So last week I posed the question, how wise are we as a nation, really? And if one of the ways that we gain wisdom is by learning from our experiences, then how would we grade ourselves? Because it seems to me that we have short attention spans and we seem to forget or gloss over the past. These people have the courage to pursue and stand in their beliefs. They're no different than Mary, who's 9 months pregnant, getting on that donkey and going to Bethlehem. It's not comfortable, it's not fun, but they're standing up and into it. These people have had the courage to pursue and stand in their beliefs, and this is the fifth principle of unity. Because in unity we say, God is good, our thoughts create a reality, the Spirit of God is within all of us, we believe in prayer and meditation, but none of it means anything if we don't put feet on our prayers, if we don't step forward. And so they are an example of that. Mary put feet on her prayers. She was willing to travel to Bethlehem even when it wasn't convenient for the Christ to be born. You may be called to stand for the truth even though it's not comfortable or easy. So what's going on in North Dakota, as I said, it's about more than money or corporations or oil. It's about this healing that seems to be taking place on a whole other level than, so we have what's happening and what's going on, and then we have what's happening and what's going on. So also last week, Wesley Clark Jr., one of the veterans came to, thousands of veterans came last week to help in this cause, and he is the son of General Wesley Clark. And he asked for forgiveness from the tribal leaders. He wrote first and said that he wanted to come, and a representative said that Wes represented the U.S. military, who had been our historic enemy, but we wanted to make peace for the benefit of all the people in the world. This was in the Chicago Tribune. But I just want to give you a couple of sentences from his speech. He said, "We come here to be the conscience of a nation. And within that conscience, we must first confess our sins to you, because many of us, me in particular, are from the units that have hurt you over the many years. We came, we fought you, we took your land, we signed treaties that we broke, we stole minerals from your sacred hills. We didn't respect you. We have hurt you in so many ways, but we've come to say that we are sorry, we are at your service, and we beg for your forgiveness." He then knelt down, and Chief Leonard Crow Dog put his hand on his head and just said, "World peace, world peace, world peace." This is what world peace looks like. It looks like we begin to learn from our experience, not only personally, so that we don't have post-traumatic syndrome, but we have post-growth syndrome. So we not only learn from our personal experiences in our life, but we learn collectively. What have we learned from our past? And that is one step in that. So this is what world peace looks like. This is what the Christ being born in the world looks like. A true seeker and a sage. They come in all shapes, they come in all sizes, all ages, and all colors. A sage learns from experiences. A sage keeps company with those who uplift them, who see the Christ light in one another, who listens to the inner voice and shines their own light. And finally, most importantly, a sage is called to put feet on their prayers. So as we continue this month in saging, may we be together in this. May we find ways for the Christ to be born at a real, deep, meaningful level by seeing it in each other and by speaking what it is we know and hear. Like Hildegard, look at her influence for the last 1,000 years upon us. So that said, thank you.